So now we want to start on our JavaScript for this project. So basically we want to be able to click on next and have it move to the next one, click on previous, have it move to the one before it. So let's start off by bringing in what we need. Let's bring in, let's say, progress and set that equal to document.getElementById, and we have an ID of progress. Okay, we also want to bring in the buttons, so we have prev, set that to prev, and then we have next, set that to next, and then we also want to bring in our circles. So for this, since there's more than one, make sure you put a dot here because it's a class of circle, and since there's more than one, we're going to use query selector all, which will bring them all in as a node list, which is similar to an array. So let's call this circles. All right, so that's all we want to bring in from the DOM. So this here is going to be basically like an index. We're going to call this current active, which is going to represent whichever one is active, which we'll set to 1 by default. And then let's have some event listeners. So actually let's do next first. So we'll take the next button and let's add an event listener onto it. We want to listen for a click. And when it clicks, we're going to run a function, and we want to take that whatever the current active is at the time and increment it by 1. So plus plus will, if it's set to 1, it'll set it to 2, and so on. And in fact, we'll just go ahead and console log current active. And if we go over here and open up the console, if I click next, goes to 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Let's see, let's get rid of that. We do want to keep it within its boundaries, so let's make sure that if it gets to the end, it doesn't go past 4. So we'll do an if statement here, and let's say if the current active is greater than, and then we can take circles, which we brought in, and it's a node list, so we can treat it like an array. So it has a length property. So we'll say if it's greater than the length meaning the amount of circles, in this case 4, then let's set the current active, let's set that to whatever the length is, which will be, the last one. So we're going to say circles.length. Okay, now if we go and we click next, actually let's do the console log again. So current active, and then next, so 2, 3, 4, and notice it's staying at 4, it's not going to 5. So that's what we want. And then for now we're going to have, obviously we need to show this in the DOM, but before we do that, I just want to create the previous. So I'm going to copy that, and let's say prev.addEventListener, and we want to take the current active and we want to decrement that by 1, so we'll do minus minus, and then for the check here we're going to say if the current active is less than 1, then we know we're at the very beginning, so we just want to set current active to 1, okay, because we don't want it to go under into 0, negative, and so on. So we have those two event listeners. Now after we do that, we're going to call a function called update. Oops. So we're going to call update there. We're also going to call it right here. So basically we're going to update the DOM. So down here, let's create a function called update. And first thing we'll do here is take our circles, which is a node list, and we can loop through those with a for each. And the for each takes in a function. I'm going to use an arrow function, and we want to say for each circle, and then I'm also going to get the index. Okay, so for each circle, I'm going to check to see if the index of that particular circle is less than the current active. If that's so, then I'm going to add the active class onto it. So I'll take that particular circle, I keep misspelling circle, and say classlist.add, and we can add the class of active. Okay, else then we want to take circle and remove the class. So class list dot remove active. Okay, so I'll save that. And now if I click this, you'll see that this second circle is now highlighted. If I click next again, highlighted, next again, and so on. All right, and I realize we can't do the previous yet, but we'll get to that. So after this for each here, let's get all of the active circles, because once we click this, active is on now on all of these circles. I can show you here, so you can see active is on all of them. So I'm going to say const actives and set that to document.query selector all, and we want all the class of active. All right, now we want to handle the progress bar, because we don't want just the circles lighting up blue. We want these lines to light blue as well. So the way we can do this, let me just first of all console log. So if I say actives, let's do actives.length, and let's do circles.length, and go to our console here and click. So we get 2, 4. So 2 is the number of actives, and the circles is always going to be 4 because that's all of the circles. If I click again, we get 3, 4, 4, 4. So I want to get a percentage for our progress length, or not length, width, because if we look in our progress class, it's a width of 0%. We want to change that. When we go ahead and click, we want that to change so that the line goes to the next one, and so on. So if we take the actives length, actually let's just console log this. Take the actives length, divide that by circles length, we get 0.5, 0.75, and then 1. Now our goal is to get these to be percentages for the CSS width property. So let's wrap this right here, this whole thing in parentheses, and then let's multiply that by 100, and then that's going to give us 50, 75, 100, which isn't correct because 50 is going to bring it to here, and then it'll go to 75. Actually, we can try this so you can see. So instead of console logging this, let's get rid of the wrapped parentheses here, and we'll keep this wrapped and set the progress dot style, and we want the width property, which is initially 0%, and let's set it to that and see what happens. So if I click next, all right, so we're not seeing the line because what we're doing here is setting the width to 100, but there's no unit. It has to be 100%. So I'm just gonna concatenate on with a plus sign a %. So now let's click next, and you can see the blue line fills up, although it's not going to the right place. It's going past the 2, because remember it was 50, 75, 100, which we don't want. We want to change it to be like 33%, 66%. So we can fix that by just taking the circles length and the actives length and subtracting 1 from those, which will give us a lower percentage. So let's do that. And now if I click next, wait a minute, that's not right. We have to wrap this, and we have to wrap this. There we go. So now it goes to 2, so it's around, the width is around 33%, and then it goes to 3, which is around 66, and then next, and it goes to 4. All right, now obviously we can't go back with the previous, so let's continue on here. And I want to first check, we're just going to do an if statement here and check the current active. So if the current active is equal to 1, so if it's in its first place, we want previous to be disabled. So we can take the previous button and we can simply set disabled, and we can set that to true. It's initially set to true, but we're going to make it we're going to take that off once we click next, but if we go back, we want it to go back to true. So we want to set that, and then let's do an else if, and for this else if, we're going to say if the current, basically want to see if it's at the end. So if it equals the total length of circles, so circles length, then we know it's at the end. So then we'll disable the next button. So we'll take next and set disabled and set that to true. Else, then we don't want either of them to be disabled. So we'll take previous dot disabled and set that to false. And we also want to do the same with next. This means that we're in the middle. So we'll save that. I'll click next. And now previous is available to us. If I click next again and then next again, now I can't click next because we're at the end. If I click previous, goes back, and then goes disabled. Okay, so that's it. And I know obviously this by itself isn't much use to you, but you can at least see how the logic works as far as the progress bar, and you could use this in any kind of steps really, a shopping cart, whatever it might be, a form, some kind of form. So feel free to take this and run with it and create something bigger and better. But that's it. Let's go ahead and move on to the next project.